Genesis chapter 18. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So obviously the Lord appeared to Abram, and this was after all the men and Abram was circumcised. So I think this is possibly about 3 months later, and I'll tell you why. Verse 2, so he lifted, that's Abram, lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men, I want you to see that, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground. Now this was a custom where they were very hospitable in the Middle East, because obviously people travel through the desert, etc. And so you don't know who's going to pass by your tent door or your dwelling. And Abram said, my Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts, and after that you may pass by, insomuch as you have come to your servant. Then they said, do as you have said. So Abram hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes. So in other words, bake some bread or some cake. And Abram ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and he hastened to prepare it. So he took butter and milk, and the calf which he had prepared, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Okay, so I want you to look at that and see that these 3 men that appeared, Abram made them bread and meat and milk, and he stood by them while they ate. Verse 9. Then they said to him, where is Sarah your wife? So he said, here in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life. That's why I think it's 3 months that the Lord appeared to him, because the time of life, if I read this, is possibly the time of pregnancy in the womb, 40 weeks, 9 months. And listen to what the Lord says. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son. Now Sarah was listening in the tent door which was behind him. Now Abram and Sarah were old, well advanced in age and of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being also old? Remember, Abram laughed in the previous chapter, now Sarah laughs, because they can't fathom this out. And the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I surely bear a son since I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I want to read that again. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, no, but you did laugh. Then the men rose from there and looked towards Sodom, and Abram went with them to send them on their way. Okay, but then the Lord said, shall I hide from Abram what I am doing? Since Abram shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice. And that's the ways of the Lord, is that we do righteousness and justice. We live rightly, and we honor, we deal with people justly, that the Lord may bring Abram what he has spoken to him. And the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have altogether, according to the outcry against it, whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me. If not, I will know. Then the men, okay, I want you to remember that, verse 22, then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom. But Abram still stood before the Lord. So how many people or men appeared to Abram? 3. Verse 22 says, then the men, But then it also says, but the Lord stayed with Abram. Abram stood before the Lord. And I want you just to go quickly to chapter 19, verse 1. Now the two angels came to Sodom. So I want you to see when it says the men turned away, it's possibly the two angels. Then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom. But Abram stood still before the Lord. And Abram came near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? So now Abram standing in the gap and pleading for Sodom and Gomorrah. So he's an intercessor here. Verse 25, this is Abram talking. Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? So now he's calling God out on his character, on his integrity, on his principles. Verse 26, so the Lord said, okay, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. Okay, now they don't even go look for the 50. Abram immediately jumps in and says, verse 27, then Abram answered and said, indeed now, I who am but dust and ashes, have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose there were 5 less than 50 righteous. Would you destroy all of the city for lack of 5? So he said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. Abram continues, and he spoke to him again yet and said, suppose that there should be 40 found there. So he said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. So every time the Lord is compromising. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry and I will speak. Suppose 30 should be found there. So he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, indeed now, I've taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 should be found there. So he said, okay, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Verse 32. Then he said, this is Abram speaking again, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but once more. Suppose 10 should be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So the Lord went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abram, and Abram returned to his place. So now the Lord is saying, if there's 10 righteous people there, he will not destroy the city. And this is starting with Abram pleading for 50. So when we get down to Sodom and Gomorrah, we're going to see what the Lord sees.